Let's do Glenn Greenwald.
Oh no, now we're going for the other side
This
of
is
things, huh?
this is taken from the same event, but
Glenn
he,
Greenwald.
I don't even know. Let's just get into it.
You have to realize this is to my left here. There we go.
Yeah.
So,
How could
I also want to address
Oh no.
Oh.
Is this
No
is
one
from
wants
that
to
event
address
we
it
did
anymore.
already, right?
Yeah.
Lovely.
But it's a different clip.
All right, let's start it back up.
So, I also want to address that root cause issue in a minute, because it's really at the crux of everything we're talking about here. Because even people inclined to agree with a lot of what we're saying about the value of privacy ultimately run into that brick wall called terrorism, which is really just fear mongering. You elevate people's fear enough, and they're eager to run into the arms of authority. This is human nature that has existed for as long as human beings have. But let me just quickly address a
Yeah, well, except for the people that see the authority as the overbearing problem.
I love how it's so trivialized. Like, oh, it's not really a big deal.
Yeah.
It's just a scheme to get you to love the government more.
Yeah, exactly.
couple of specific points with relation to terrorism and surveillance. First of all, the key difference is between targeted surveillance and mass surveillance. Nobody disagrees that targeted surveillance is legitimate. The idea that you have reason to believe that certain individuals are plotting violent acts against civilians, and therefore you monitor their communications. If that's what the US government had been doing, you would never have known the name Edward Snowden. There would never have been a leak. That's exactly what they're not doing. What they're doing instead is
I mean, it depends.
Well,
on
they
what
are,
what
mind you. No.
consider-
Mind you, they are. They are indeed doing that. Every other branch of the government does that. Do you know
it
what
does
data
happen.
banking is, friend? They're data banking. Once I discovered that's all they were doing and that they were in a locked file, I stopped talking about this issue because I realized that you're not understanding what's actually going on.
Yeah, very
They're
clearly.
data
It
banking.
depends.
They could, even if they wanted to, even if they absolutely, desperately wanted to, they couldn't go through all the data they've already collected. It's impossible.
Oh, there's so
It's
much.
impossible. They cannot comb these files.
When it comes to this, a lot of this, the crux of this is obviously what Glenn Greenwald considers targeted. Now, if we have many targets, is it still targeted or is it widespread? I would argue still targeted, but it seems like he's going a different way with that. We do have a lot of targets. There are a lot of people planning terrorist attacks, Glenn. That doesn't mean that if we are trying to survey a large area, that we are intrinsically against every single person in that area. It's actually hard to find terrorists. I don't know if people understand this, but they tend to hide among civilians. That's kind of their thing. They don't want to be found.
mass surveillance.
Oh my God.
They've constructed the largest system.
I think honestly the phrasing mass surveillance is the problem. Because you get this idea that you get this 1984 idea, which by the way nobody ever teaches in school the break of 1984, which is that you would have to have an equal number of government employees to monitor every human being on Earth. There's no way even a 4-way split monitor, so maybe a 2-to-1 you can get away with. But even then, there's going to be massive amounts of minor slips where someone does something when one person's looking in on one screen and not the other. So it gets to a level of absurdity under that. So that when people hear mass surveillance, that's what they think. That's not what they're even doing. They're mass data gathering. And that's more accurate.
Yeah, like there's just some eye in the sky, always watching you.
They're playing on paranoia. They're accusing people of playing on fear, and they're fear mongering.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, you know what? You guys, you overhyped this whole terrorist thing, but listen, the real problem is the government's watching you right now.
Yeah, and I'm not big on the data mining, but it's the fear mongering. If you would just tell it what it was, it would be different. You're actually fear mongering. You're saying mass surveillance. That's a very specific and important word choice.
Wow.
islands ever created in human history, where they're targeting not specific individuals who are likely involved in terrorism, but hundreds of millions of people, entire populations, to very invasive scrutiny. One of the things that struck me when I read through the documents,
I mean, how to what extent are those people involved in terrorist acts, and to what extent is the possibility that they would...
you notice that his language changed when he started discussing this, because now what he's saying is that certain populations... Did you note the language change?
Oh yeah.
He
I wonder
shifted
who
it
you're
again.
talking about, Glenn. I wonder.
So what he's saying is that, yeah, the populations that have certain histories or anything like... I've probably got, like I said, I've always joked, if they want to take me down, they could. It's not... The U.S. government's like that. They've always been like that, one way or the other. Most governments are like that. I mean, it's you're gonna have to live with the fact that most governments don't particularly appreciate when you fight against them.
It's almost from what I'm gathering from this, it's just a ridiculous request to make. Like, oh, how dare the government, gather information on potential terrorists? Like, what? They have every right to defend themselves and defend the citizens.
Yeah, and
What
again,
bullshit.
the problem is that, and they desperately tried early on. I actually recall, in retrospect, them trying to say mass data collection and not mass surveillance. But it didn't
I mean,
stick.
it is more accurate, and it would lessen some of this Glenn Greenwald paranoia.
Of them have anything to do with terrorism. As Professor Chomsky was saying earlier, you read through documents and you're shocked by how little of it has to do with national security. There's tons of it that have to do with spying on economic targets, on oil companies, on economic conferences where countries negotiate trade agreements, spying for diplomatic advantage, spying on entire populations, including our own. Very little of this apparatus has been devoted.
My question, friend, is even if this is true, which I don't doubt because it would be in the government's interest to do so, who do we back? Do we back our government? Should we not be concerned with our national interests as citizens? Why should this upset me?
Yeah, like, if you have nothing to hide, this might be an unpopular opinion, but really, like, the government's like, oh, they look at your search history.
Well, they don't. That's the fear-mongering. They don't look at your search history unless your fucking name comes up. Now, the secret now is that they've got a database where they can actually pull your IP address and your search history at a whim. That's full of the information that they already have accumulated about you. Now, you want to have a discussion about whether that's okay? All right, we can have that discussion, but most people don't even know that that's what's going on. These guys can't just... They're not, like I said, they're not sitting around just flipping through the data arbitrarily looking for crime breaking. They don't have the time for that. No one has the time for that. It's an absurd notion.
It's so ridiculous.
These people presume a level of functioning bureaucracy that can never exist.
What are we supposed to do? Like, really, what is the other answer? Like, fuck the government. We're rebels now. Like, what? What possible action could you take against us?
You better learn Russian or Mandarin, one of the two.
Oh yeah, because those governments don't watch their citizens.
No, what I'm saying is they're gonna come. What are you gonna take over the government? No, as soon as we started a revolution, one of those two countries would take full fucking advantage of it.
That would be interesting. It's probably not going to happen, though.
No. Actual terrorism. And then the final specific point I want to make about that is that we always talk about, and your question suggested this, that there's a trade-off between security and privacy. So that if you want more security, you have to give up more privacy and let the government spy more, and vice versa.
It'd be nice to have a country. It'd be nice to, first off, be alive, and it'd be nice to have a functioning country that you could actually salvage some privacy in.
He's not really concerned with that.
Really false dichotomy. And huge numbers of experts have said that when you allow the government to collect billions of telephone calls and emails every day, as the U.S. government is doing, billions every day, that it is virtually...
Well, at least he'll admit here it's collect and not surveil.
Yeah, and he's about to say that they can't, comb through all of them. Well, then what the fuck have you been rambling about?
To find who's going to detonate a bomb at the Boston Marathon, or who is planning on blowing up a jetliner over Detroit, or detonating a bomb in the subway and airport of Brussels, or attacking a newspaper in Paris, because they're collecting so much information that they can't possibly find what they claim they're looking for. And if I know that, and if all these experts are saying that, they know that as well, which ought to really provoke the question, is it really the case that they're just so incompetent that they don't get this basic fact that if they collect everything, they won't know what they have?
So basically the point I was making, they're not using it for direct surveillance, you fucking fraud.
I like how he differentiated between himself and experts.
Yeah, that's a good differentiation, to be fair.
Fuck Glenn Greenwald. What a bunch of alarmist bullshit.
Yeah, that was particularly bad. I mean, he constantly shifted his position. That was amazing to watch, but just cringy as fuck.